My name is Margaret, I'm 72 years old, and I'm speaking to you all from Georgia, right here in the United States of America. Before I begin this painful but important story, I want to kindly ask you, please subscribe, like, and click the notification button so you won't miss any of my upcoming stories. I also want to know from which part of the country you are watching this story from, so kindly drop it in the comments. Now let me take you into my life. I will never forget the night I decided to pretend I had gone blind. My husband had beaten me until my face swelled so badly I couldn't see clearly. I lay on the floor, blood dripping from my mouth, my body aching all over. But then something strange happened. When he stormed out of the room, I whispered to myself, "Margaret, if you want to survive this, you better stop seeing. Stop seeing everything, at least in his eyes." So when he came back the next morning, I sat quietly on the bed, staring blankly into the air. I didn't look at him. I didn't look at the wall. My eyes just stayed fixed, empty. He shouted, "Margaret, look at me." I turned my head toward the sound of his voice, but my eyes didn't blink. I made them look hollow, like they were staring into nothingness. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, his voice shaking just a little. "I whispered. I can't see." The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like the room was choking me. He stepped closer, snapping his fingers in front of my face. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just kept staring into the emptiness. For the first time in all the years of his violence, I saw fear on his face. He grabbed my arm, shaking me, but I let my body fall limp, helpless, blind. In that moment I knew I had found my only escape. But what happened next changed everything. Now let me take you back to how it all started. Long before I ever thought of pretending to lose my sight. I grew up in a small town in Georgia in the 1950s. My parents were strict but loving, and we didn't have much money, but we had peace. I used to run barefoot on the dusty roads, chasing after fireflies in the evenings. Life felt simple and innocent back then. But when I turned 19, I met Henry. At first, he was everything a young girl could dream of: tall, handsome, charming. He had a way of speaking that made you believe him instantly. He would tell me, "Margaret, I'll take care of you. You'll never suffer a day in your life if you're with me." I believed him. I was just a young girl, eager for love, eager to build a family. We married within a year, and at first, it seemed like my dreams had come true. He worked at a factory and I stayed home, taking care of the little house we rented. But not long after our wedding, the first slap came. I remember it clearly. He had come home late, drunk, and I asked him where he'd been. His hand struck my cheek so fast I thought I had imagined it. Then he looked at me and said, "Don't you ever question me again." I cried myself to sleep that night, but in the morning he brought me flowers. He apologized, saying it would never happen again. Of course it did. Weeks turned into months, and months into years. The beatings became regular, almost like a punishment schedule. Sometimes it was because the food was too cold. Sometimes because I spoke when he didn't want me to. Sometimes for reasons I couldn't even understand. But the cruelest part was the cycle. After every beating, he would act tender again. He would tell me I was the only woman he loved. He would hold me and whisper, "You make me crazy, Margaret, but I can't live without you." I wanted to believe those words. I wanted to think the man I married was still there. But the bruises on my body told me otherwise. The worst beating before the blindness night happened one rainy evening. I had just finished making dinner when he barged into the house, soaked and angry. He claimed I had been talking to another man in town, which wasn't true. Before I could defend myself, he threw the plate of food across the room and shoved me against the wall so hard my head hit the plaster. I thought I was going to die that night. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor, and my whole body felt numb. I could barely see from one eye because it had swollen shut. He was snoring on the couch, as if nothing had happened. It was then the idea began to form in my mind. What if I just stopped being alive in front of him? What if I became useless, untouchable, so broken that even he would feel fear? That thought stayed in my heart until the night I finally put it into action. The night I pretended to go blind. But the danger of living with a violent man is that you never know how far he will go. You never know if the escape you've chosen will actually save you, or trap you even further. And that is exactly what I was about to discover. Because the very night after I told him I couldn't see, something happened that shook me to my very core. When I told Henry the first couldn't see, I thought maybe, just maybe, he would leave me alone. I thought he would be scared of breaking me even further. But what happened that very night proved how twisted his mind really was. He stood there staring at me, his hands shaking. For a moment, I thought I saw guilt in his eyes. But then his lips curled into a smile I will never forget. "So you're blind now?" he asked slowly, almost whispering. "Good. Then you won't see what I'm about to do." Those words froze my blood. He dragged me from the bed by my arm. My knees scraped the floor as he pulled me into the kitchen. I kept my eyes wide, blank, refusing to blink or look at him. My heart pounded so loudly I was afraid he could hear it. He opened a drawer and took out a sharp kitchen knife. I heard the metallic scrape as it slid against the wood. He pressed it close to my cheek and said, "Blind people don't need mirrors, do they? So maybe I should mark that pretty face so no man will ever want you again." I wanted to scream, but I knew if I reacted, he would know I could still see. So I just whispered, "Please don't." For a second, he held the knife so close I felt the cold steel against my skin. Then suddenly he laughed and dropped it back in the drawer. "You're pathetic," he said. "Completely useless now." He shoved me to the floor and walked away, slamming the bedroom door behind him. That night, I lay on the cold kitchen tiles, shaking uncontrollably. My plan had worked. He believed I was blind, but I didn't realize what that would mean for me. Because from that day forward, I was no longer a wife in his eyes. I was a broken toy. The following days were both calmer and more terrifying. He didn't hit me as often. Instead, he treated me like a burden. He would leave me in bed all day without food. Sometimes he would mock me by waving his hand in front of my face, trying to see if I would flinch. I never did. To survive, I learned how to act blind. I memorized the number of steps from the bed to the bathroom. I learned how to pour water into a glass without looking, tilting the jug carefully until I felt the cool touch of water against my skin. Every day, I practiced being helpless, even though deep inside, my eyes still worked. But here's the thing about lies. You can never fully control them. One afternoon, about a week after I pretended to go blind, Henry brought home his younger brother, Thomas. Unlike Henry, Thomas was gentle and kind. He had always shown me respect, even giving me money secretly when Henry refused to. When Thomas entered the room, I could feel his eyes on me. I kept staring into emptiness, pretending. But then, as he bent to place a cup of tea on the table beside me, I accidentally glanced at his hand. It was the smallest slip, but Thomas noticed. Later that night, when Henry went out drinking, Thomas returned to check on me. He whispered, "Margaret, I know you can see." My heart nearly stopped. I wanted to deny it, but the look in his eyes told me he wasn't going to expose me. Instead, he leaned closer and whispered, "Don't worry. I won't tell Henry." "But why are you pretending?" Tears rolled down my cheeks as I whispered, "Because it's the only way to survive him." Thomas looked pained. He touched my hand gently and said, "You don't have to live like this." Those words planted a seed of hope in me. But hope is dangerous when you're trapped in the hands of a cruel man. The following week, Henry grew suspicious. He noticed how I managed to find things too easily. One evening, he tested me. He quietly placed a chair in the middle of the room, then called my name. As I stood up and walked forward, my shin slammed into the chair, and I cried out in pain. He laughed. "Good. So you really are blind." But deep down, I knew he was watching me more closely than ever. One wrong move and he would kill me. Things stayed tense until one stormy night. The rain hammered against the windows and the power went out. Henry was drunk again, stumbling around the house. I tried to stay still, hoping he would pass out, but instead he dragged me outside into the rain. He pushed me into the mud and shouted, "If you're blind, then maybe the storm will wash your soul clean." I shivered as the cold rain soaked me to the bone. Lightning flashed across the sky and thunder roared. He stood over me, laughing like a madman. Then suddenly he lifted me up and dragged me toward the barn. I screamed, "Please, stop!" But he didn't. He flung the barn doors open and shoved me inside. The smell of hay and old wood filled my nose. Then he locked the doors from the outside, trapping me in total darkness. I pounded on the doors, begging him to let me out, but all I heard was his cruel laughter fading into the storm. For the first time since I pretended to lose my sight, I wondered if I had made a mistake. Maybe I had only traded one kind of prison for another. Hours passed. The rain dripped through the barn roof. My clothes clung to my body, heavy and cold. I curled up on the hay, shivering and praying for dawn. But just as I began to drift into sleep, I heard something that made my blood run cold. It wasn't the rain. It wasn't the wind. It was the sound of heavy breathing. And it was coming from the far corner of the barn. I froze. Someone, or something, was in there with me. The barn was pitch dark, and my heart thumped so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. The storm outside rattled the old wooden walls, but the sound I heard was not the wind. It was breathing low, heavy, steady. I whispered into the darkness, "Hello?" No answer. I sat up, straining my ears. The hay rustled, not far from where I lay. My skin prickled with terror. For a moment, I thought Henry had tricked me. Maybe he was inside the barn too, watching me, testing if I could see. I forced myself to remember my role. I was blind. I couldn't run to the door. I couldn't search the barn with my eyes. So I stayed still, my body trembling. The breathing grew louder, closer. Then I heard a chain rattle. My blood froze. Suddenly, lightning lit up the cracks in the wooden boards for just a split second, and I saw it. A huge, shadowy figure crouched in the corner. It wasn't Henry. It was the old bull. I gasped, covering my mouth quickly to muffle the sound. Henry had forgotten, or maybe he knew, that the bull was kept in that barn, chained at night. The animal's eyes glowed faintly in the lightning, and its massive head swung slowly from side to side. One wrong move, and it could crush me. I pressed myself against the far wall, trying to stay as quiet as possible. The hours crawled by. My body ached from the cold, my stomach growled, and every few minutes, the bull shifted, its hooves thudding against the floor. By dawn, the storm had passed, but the barn doors remained locked. I was trapped. It wasn't until midday that I heard footsteps outside. My heart leapt. Maybe Henry was finally coming to let me out. But when the latch clicked open and the doors creaked apart, it wasn't Henry who stood there. It was Thomas. He rushed in, his face pale with worry. "Margaret, what are you doing in here?" I blinked, forcing my eyes to stay dull and empty. "Henry, he locked me in." Thomas cursed under his breath. He helped me to my feet, brushing the hay from my dress. His hands lingered on mine, warm and gentle. The first kindness I had felt in a long time. He led me back to the house, whispering, "You can't keep living like this. He's going to kill you one day." I wanted to tell him everything. That I wasn't blind, that I was only pretending, but fear kept my mouth shut. If Henry ever found out, it would be the end of me. For the next few weeks, life settled into a strange rhythm. Henry seemed less violent but more careless. Sometimes he would leave me without food for hours, assuming I couldn't cook for myself anymore. Other times he would laugh cruelly, saying, "A blind woman is no wife. You're just a shadow in this house." But Thomas, he began to visit more often. Whenever Henry went to work or out drinking, Thomas would bring me bread, fruit, or water. Sometimes he would sit beside me and tell me about the outside world, about the neighbors, about the town gossip, about the sunshine I never saw. In those moments I felt alive again. I even caught myself smiling, something I hadn't done in years. But Henry's shadow was always there, looming over me. One evening, after a long silence, Thomas leaned close and whispered, "Margaret, come with me. Let me take you away from here. I'll protect you." My heart skipped a beat. The thought of escape had never felt so real. But then fear gripped me again. If Henry finds us, he'll kill us both. Thomas squeezed my hand. "Then let's be smart about it. We'll plan. We'll wait for the right moment." His words gave me hope, but also filled me with dread. Because hope can be the most dangerous weapon in an abusive marriage. That same night, Henry came home earlier than expected. He staggered into the kitchen and froze. There, on the table, sat a loaf of fresh bread and a jug of milk, things Henry hadn't bought. He turned to me, his eyes narrowing. Where did this come from? I panicked. My mouth went dry. I I don't know. Maybe a neighbor brought it. He slammed his fist on the table, making the jug topple and spill. You're lying. Who's been in my house? I kept staring into nothingness, praying my blank eyes would convince him. But inside, I was shaking like a leaf. Henry grabbed my shoulders, shaking me violently. Tell me the truth, Margaret. Or blind or not, I'll make sure you never open your mouth again. I bit my tongue, holding back tears. Finally, he shoved me away and stormed out of the house. I collapsed on the floor, gasping for breath, my heart racing. But as I lay there, I realized something terrifying. Henry was suspicious now. My act had bought me time, but it was crumbling. The next morning, I overheard him talking to a neighbor outside. His words made my stomach drop. She's blind now, he said, almost laughing. Maybe it's time I get myself another woman. One who can actually see. I froze. Another woman? After all the years of suffering, he was planning to replace me like old furniture. But what chilled me to the bone wasn't that he wanted someone else. It was what he said next. And once I have her, I'll get rid of Margaret. No one will even ask questions about a blind widow. My knees buckled beneath me. He was planning to kill me. I pressed my ear harder against the wooden wall, praying I had misheard Henry's words. But there was no mistake. His voice was steady, cold, almost casual as he spoke with the neighbor. She's useless now, he said. Blind, weak. A man like me needs a proper wife, not a broken one. Once I bring another woman into this house, Margaret won't be a problem anymore. The neighbor chuckled uneasily, then asked, What about her family? Won't they ask questions? Henry's reply sent shivers through my bones. No one cares about her. She's just an old shadow in this town. When she's gone, people will assume it was her blindness that finished her. My knees trembled. My heart raced. For years I had lived with fear, but this was different. This wasn't just about bruises or broken bones. He was planning my death. I staggered back into the kitchen, trying to keep my breathing quiet. My mind whirled. Should I run? Should I confide in Thomas? Should I keep pretending? By the time Henry came back inside, I was sitting stiffly on the chair, my blank eyes staring into nothingness. He studied me for a long moment, his lips curling into a strange smile. Dinner better be ready, he muttered, though he knew full well he had stopped letting me cook. That night, I lay in bed pretending to sleep while Henry snored beside me. My body ached with dread. Every creak of the house felt like death inching closer. The next morning, Thomas visited again, slipping inside while Henry was at work. He brought me bread and whispered urgently, Margaret, you have to leave. He's dangerous. Tears burned my eyes. I grabbed Thomas's hand and whispered back, He's planning to kill me. Thomas froze. What? He said it himself. He wants another woman. He said once she comes, he'll get rid of me. Thomas's face turned pale, then hard with determination. Then you can't stay here another day. I'll take you away. Tonight. But fear held me like chains. If he finds us, he'll kill us both. Thomas squeezed my hand tighter. Then we'll outsmart him. Pretend you know nothing. I'll come for you when it's safe. For the first time I felt a flicker of hope. The day dragged on painfully slow. Henry seemed unusually cheerful, humming to himself as he sharpened his hunting knife at the table. Each scrape of the blade against the stone made my skin crawl. By evening he left the house, saying he had business in town. My heart pounded. Was this my chance? But just as I was gathering courage to leave, the door creaked open again. I froze. It wasn't Thomas. It wasn't Henry. It was a woman. She was young, pretty, with dark hair pinned neatly at the back. She carried a small bag and glanced around nervously before stepping inside. When her eyes landed on me, she forced a polite smile. You must be Margaret, she said softly. Henry told me about you. My stomach dropped. Henry had already started bringing her into the house. I stared blankly, forcing my blind act. Who are you? My name is Clara, she said. Henry invited me here. He said you weren't well. Her words stung like poison. Not well. That's what he called me. Not well. Broken. Useless. I wanted to scream, to warn her, to tell her what kind of monster Henry truly was. But if I did, she might run straight to him and expose my secret. So I whispered only, "You shouldn't be here." Before she could reply, the door slammed open again. Henry walked in, grinning like the devil himself. "Well, well," he said, wrapping his arm around Clara. "I see you've met my wife." Clara shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between us. "Henry, maybe this isn't right." But Henry cut her off. "Don't worry about Margaret. She's blind. She doesn't see a thing. She won't be around much longer anyway." I forced my body to stay limp, my eyes blank. Inside, I was screaming. The evening was torture. Henry poured Clara wine, laughing loudly, flirting openly. He even kissed her right there in front of me, knowing I was watching, but believing I couldn't see. At one point, Clara's eyes met mine. I don't know what she saw, maybe the glimmer of truth, maybe the silent scream in my stare, but she looked away quickly, her face pale. When Clara finally left, Henry turned to me. His smile vanished. "You're in my way, Margaret," he said coldly. "Sooner or later, you'll be gone." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound of the house felt like a warning. I prayed for Thomas to return, to rescue me. But instead, I was awakened by the sound of heavy footsteps at the foot of my bed. I opened my eyes, just a sliver, and saw Henry standing there, silhouetted in the darkness. In his hand, glinting faintly in the moonlight, was the hunting knife. He whispered almost tenderly, "Maybe tonight's the night." The sound of Henry's voice in the dark froze my blood. "Maybe tonight's the night," he whispered, the knife glinting faintly as he twirled it in his hand. I forced myself to keep my eyes wide and empty, staring into nothing. My heart thundered in my chest, but I couldn't let him see fear. If I blinked, if I flinched, if I gave him any sign that I could still see, it would be the end of me. He leaned closer, so close I could feel his breath hot on my face. He held the knife at my throat, pressing lightly against my skin. "Blind little Margaret," he said slowly. "What good are you now? Can't cook, can't clean, can't even look at me. Maybe I should put you out of your misery." I wanted to scream, to push him away, but I stayed frozen limp, helpless. My only weapon was my act. Then suddenly, he pulled the knife back and let out a cruel laugh. "Not tonight. I want you to feel the waiting. I want you to wonder, every day, if it's your last." He slammed the knife into the wooden bedpost, the blade sinking deep into the wood just inches from my head. I bit my lip hard to keep from gasping. Then he stumbled back, chuckling, and left the room. Moments later, I heard his heavy snoring from the couch. I lay there all night staring blankly into the darkness, too terrified to even close my eyes. The next morning Thomas came again. I told him everything in whispers, the knife, the threats, the new woman named Clara. His face hardened. "That's it," he said firmly. "We can't wait any longer. Tonight I'll take you away. Pack nothing. Just be ready." Fear gripped me. What if he follows us? What if he finds us? Thomas shook his head. "I'll protect you. He won't touch you again." His words gave me strength but also fear, because if Henry caught us, he would kill Thomas first and I would never forgive myself. That evening, Henry came home smelling of alcohol and perfume. He strutted around the house like a king, bragging about Clara. "She's young. She's fresh. She knows how to make a man feel alive. Unlike you, Margaret." I kept my face blank, my eyes empty, but inside, my rage boiled. He had stolen my youth, my peace, my happiness, and now he wanted to erase me altogether. The hours dragged until midnight, when Henry finally passed out drunk on the couch. My hands shook as I crept toward the door, pretending to fumble blindly so if he woke, it would seem real. Just as I reached for the doorknob, the floor creaked. I froze. His snoring stopped. "Where are you going?" Henry's voice cut through the silence, low and dangerous. My throat went dry. I was just looking for water." He laughed bitterly. "Water? Blind as you are." He stood up, staggering toward me. My heart pounded as he grabbed my arm and yanked me close. "Tell me the truth, Margaret. You're hiding something. I can feel it." Before I could reply, a knock rattled the door. Henry froze. His eyes narrowed. "Who the hell is that at this hour?" He shoved me aside and yanked the door open. It was Thomas. Henry's face darkened instantly. What are you doing here? Thomas stood tall, his voice steady. I came to check on Margaret. I don't trust you with her. The air grew thick, heavy. Henry's grip tightened on the doorframe. You don't trust me? This is my wife. My house. You stay out of it. Thomas didn't back down. She's not safe with you. Henry's face twisted with fury. In a flash, he lunged toward Thomas, fists flying. I screamed, though I kept my eyes blank. The two brothers crashed into the furniture, fists and curses filling the air. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The sound of fists hitting flesh, the grunts of rage. It was like thunder inside the house. Then I saw it. Henry's hand reaching for the knife still stuck in the bedpost. Time slowed. My breath caught in my throat. If he pulled that knife free, Thomas wouldn't stand a chance. The moment Henry's fingers curled around the knife handle, my heart nearly stopped. I knew if he pulled it out, Thomas wouldn't leave that house alive. Thomas! I screamed, my voice breaking. Thomas turned just in time to see Henry wrench the blade free from the wood with a violent jerk. The steel glinted in the lamplight as Henry raised it high. Tonight I finish this. Henry roared. Thomas lunged forward, grabbing Henry's wrist. The two brothers struggled, their bodies twisting and slamming against the furniture. The knife hovered dangerously close to Thomas's chest. Margaret, run! Thomas shouted through gritted teeth. But I couldn't. My legs were frozen to the floor. For years I had lived in terror, and now the terror pinned me like chains. I couldn't leave him to face Henry alone. The knife slashed downward, grazing Thomas's arm. Blood sprayed across the floor. He groaned but held on, wrestling Henry with all his strength. Stay down. Henry snarled, his face twisted with rage. In that moment, something inside me snapped. For years, I had played the helpless wife, the blind victim. But watching Thomas bleed because of me lit a fire I didn't know I still had. Without thinking, I grabbed the heavy iron lamp from the table and swung it with all my strength. It smashed against Henry's shoulder, knocking him off balance. He stumbled, dropping the knife, which clattered across the floor. Thomas seized the moment, shoving Henry hard against the wall. Henry crumpled, dazed but not unconscious. Breathless, Thomas grabbed my arm. We have to go now. I hesitated, trembling, but Thomas's eyes burned with urgency. Margaret, if we don't leave tonight, he'll kill us both. I nodded, forcing my legs to move. Thomas half dragged me out the door, into the cool night air. The crickets chirped, the moon cast its pale glow, and for the first time in years, I felt the taste of freedom. We ran across the field, the damp grass soaking my feet. My heart pounded, not just from fear, but from hope. Maybe, just maybe, this nightmare was ending. But hope is cruel. Behind us, a roar echoed through the night. Margaret! Henry! He was up again. And he was coming after us. We reached the edge of the woods, panting. Thomas pulled me close, whispering, "Stay quiet. Follow my lead." We crept into the darkness of the trees, branches snapping underfoot. My eyes strained to adjust, but every sound made my blood run cold. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, we reached an old shed Thomas sometimes used for storing tools. He pushed the door open and guided me inside. "Stay here," he whispered. "I'll go back and make sure he's not following." "No," I begged, grabbing his arm. "Don't leave me." "I have to," he said firmly. "If I don't, he'll track us. Trust me, Margaret." Reluctantly, I let him go. The door creaked shut, leaving me in darkness. I sank to the floor, my body trembling. My act of blindness felt heavier than ever. I couldn't even cry properly without giving myself away if Henry found me. Hours passed. I hugged my knees, listening to the night sounds. The shed smelled of damp wood and rust. Finally, the door creaked open again. "Thomas." I whispered. A shadow slipped inside. But it wasn't Thomas. It was Henry. His voice was low, mocking. "Did you really think you could run from me, Margaret?" My breath caught in my throat. I pressed myself into the corner, but he stepped closer, the outline of the knife back in his hand. "I told you," he whispered. "Sooner or later you'll be gone. And tonight," he raised the knife, his shadow towering over me, "is the night." The shed was small and suffocating, its wooden walls creaking as Henry's shadow loomed over me. His knife gleamed faintly, catching what little moonlight slipped through the cracks. "Tonight's the night," he whispered again, his voice low and heavy with menace. I pressed myself into the corner, my body trembling. My eyes stayed blank and wide, playing my part. But inside I was screaming. He stepped closer, dragging the knife slowly along the wall. The metal screeched against the wood, a sound that set my teeth on edge. "Blind little Margaret. Did you think you could leave me? You belong to me until I decide you don't." Tears burned my eyes, but I forced them to stay still, to fall straight without blinking. "Henry, please," I whispered. "Don't." He crouched in front of me, the knife tip lifting my chin. His breath reeked of alcohol. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't finish you right here." My lips trembled. For a moment, I thought I had no words left. Then something unexpected slipped out. "Because if you kill me, you'll never know if I was really blind." His eyes flickered, narrowing. For the first time, doubt crept into his face. "What?" I let my head tilt slightly, keeping my eyes dull. "Maybe I saw everything. Maybe I saw you bring Clara into the house. Maybe I saw you sharpen that knife, waiting to kill me. If you kill me now, you'll never know the truth." His hand trembled. The knife pressed harder against my skin. And then, the door burst open. "Henry!" Thomas's voice thundered as he charged into the shed. In an instant, Henry whirled around, swinging the knife. The blade sliced across Thomas's shoulder. He cried out but pushed forward, tackling Henry to the ground. The two men crashed into the wooden walls, grunting and cursing, fists flying. The knife clattered to the floor. I scrambled to my feet, panic and adrenaline coursing through me. The shed shook with their fight. For a moment, Thomas seemed to have the upper hand, pinning Henry down. But Henry's rage was wild, animal-like. With a sudden surge, he shoved Thomas off and lunged for the knife again. My breath caught. If Henry got it, Thomas would die. I didn't think, I just moved. My hand shot out, grabbing the knife before Henry could reach it. He froze, staring at me. His chest heaved. His eyes darted to my hand gripping the blade, then back to my face. For the first time, he saw something different in me. Not the helpless blind wife, but a woman holding her own fate. "You can see," he hissed. My stomach dropped. My secret was out. Thomas's head whipped toward me, his eyes wide. "Margaret!" But I couldn't speak. My hands shook as I held the knife, torn between fear and desperation. Henry rose slowly, his lips curling into a wicked smile. "Well, well," he sneered. "The little mouse was playing a game all along." He stepped forward. "Now you'll pay for it." I backed against the wall, clutching the knife with trembling hands. My mind screamed to act, to stab, to fight, but my body froze. Years of fear, years of being broken, chained me in place. Henry lunged. Thomas intercepted, slamming into him. The knife slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor again. The three of us struggled in that tiny shed, the air thick with sweat, blood, and fury. I screamed, clawed at Henry, desperate to pull him away from Thomas. But he was too strong, his fists pounding down again and again. Finally, with a roar, Henry slammed Thomas's head against the wooden floor. Thomas went limp. "No!" I screamed, throwing myself at Henry. He shoved me back effortlessly. My body hit the wall hard, the air knocked from my lungs. Henry picked up the knife once more, towering over Thomas's still body. His voice was a growl. "One brother down. Now it's your turn." He raised the knife high, ready to strike. And in that instant, Thomas's hand shot up, gripping Henry's wrist with all the strength he had left. Thomas's hand clamped tightly around Henry's wrist, stopping the knife just inches above his chest. The veins in both their arms bulged as they fought for control. Henry snarled, his face red with rage. "You should have stayed out of this, Thomas." Thomas gritted his teeth, his voice hoarse but steady. "And let you kill her? Never." The two brothers struggled, their bodies twisting violently on the shed floor. The knife shook between them, the blade flashing with each flicker of moonlight through the cracks. I stood frozen, my heart slamming against my ribs, torn between terror and the desperate urge to act. Then Henry's strength surged. With a furious roar, He forced the blade downward. Thomas cried out as the knife cut across his arm, but he held on, refusing to let Henry win. Blood spilled onto the wooden floor, dark and sticky. I couldn't watch anymore. Something inside me, something stronger than fear, snapped. I lunged forward, grabbing a heavy wooden plank from the corner of the shed. With all the strength I had left, I swung it down on Henry's back. He roared in pain, stumbling forward. The knife slipped from his grip, clattering across the floor once again. Thomas shoved him away, gasping for breath. "Margaret, get the knife." I scrambled forward, my hands closing around the cold steel handle. My chest heaved as I turned, the blade trembling in my grip. Henry staggered to his feet, eyes wild. When he saw the knife in my hands, he froze. For a split second, something like shock flickered across his face. "You wouldn't," he growled. I raised the knife, my hands shaking. "Don't come near me." For years, I had whispered, begged, pleaded with him. But this time, my voice was steady, cold. He smirked, stepping closer. "You're not strong enough, Margaret. You've never been strong enough." Thomas forced himself upright, blood dripping from his arm. "She's stronger than you think." Henry ignored him, his eyes locked on me. Step by step, he moved closer, daring me to act. My chest tightened. My whole body screamed with fear. But I held the knife steady, even as tears streamed down my face. When he was just a step away, I screamed and thrust the knife forward. The blade cut across his side, shallow but enough to make him stumble back with a howl of pain. For the first time in my life, I had hurt him. His face twisted into pure hatred. He clutched his wound and glared at me like a wounded animal. "You'll regret that, Margaret. You'll regret it until your dying breath." Before I could react, he bolted out of the shed into the darkness. Thomas staggered to me, his arm bleeding badly. "We have to get out of here before he comes back." I nodded, shaking violently. Together we stumbled out of the shed, into the night air. The field stretched before us, silent and endless under the pale moon. We ran, though every step was agony. My lungs burned, my body weak. But fear drove us forward. Fear, and the faint flicker of hope that we might finally escape him. By dawn we reached the outskirts of town. My legs gave out and I collapsed on the dirt road, gasping for air. Thomas sank beside me, clutching his wounded arm. "We'll go to the sheriff," he said, his voice ragged. "We'll tell him everything. He'll lock Henry away for good." I wanted to believe him, but a cold knot twisted in my stomach. Henry was clever, manipulative. What if the sheriff didn't believe us? What if Henry found us first? Still I nodded. "Yes, we'll tell." We rested there a while, the sun slowly rising. For the first time in years, I felt the warmth of morning without dread hanging over me. But the peace didn't last. As we limped toward town, I noticed something in the distance. A figure on horseback riding fast. The sun caught the rider's face just enough for me to see. It was Henry, and he was coming straight for us. The sound of hooves thundered against the dirt road, faster and louder with every second. Dust rose behind the horse, the morning sun catching Henry's furious face as he closed in on us. Thomas gripped my hand. "Run, Margaret." My legs were weak, trembling from the night's ordeal, but terror gave me wings. We stumbled off the road into the tall grass, hoping the fields would slow him down. The stalks whipped against my face as I forced myself forward, breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind us, Henry's voice bellowed across the open air. "You can't run from me, Margaret. You'll never escape." The horse trampled through the field, flattening everything in its path. Each thundering hoofbeat shook the ground beneath me, vibrating through my bones. Thomas shoved me ahead. "Go. Don't stop." I didn't dare look back, but I could hear Henry gaining. The horse's breath snorted, hot and violent, mixed with Henry's furious shouts. Then came the sound I dreaded. The swing of a whip cutting through the air. The leather cracked against my back, searing my skin. I screamed, stumbling forward. My knees buckled, but Thomas caught me, dragging me upright. "Keep going," he urged. We veered toward a cluster of trees in the distance, the only cover in sight. My chest burned, my vision blurred with tears, but the thought of Henry's hands dragging me back kept me moving. When we reached the trees, Thomas pulled me behind a thick trunk. "Stay here," he whispered, his chest heaving. No. I started, but he was already moving. He grabbed a broken branch from the ground and swung it wildly as Henry's horse burst into the clearing. The beast reared, whinnying as Thomas struck at its legs. Henry cursed, struggling to control the animal. Coward! Henry roared, yanking hard on the reins. You think a stick will stop me? In that split second, I saw the knife glint in his hand again. Thomas charged, aiming for Henry instead of the horse. The branch cracked against Henry's arm, knocking the blade loose. It tumbled to the ground just feet from me. Without thinking, I lunged forward, grabbing the knife once again. The cold steel felt heavy in my hand, but this time I didn't tremble. Margaret! Thomas shouted. Run with it. But Henry was faster. He swung his boot hard, kicking Thomas in the chest. My brother-in-law fell backward, gasping for air. Henry slid off the horse, his eyes locked on me like a predator. His lip curled into a smile that chilled my blood. There you are, he hissed, holding my knife again. Do you know what happens to liars, Margaret? To women who trick their husbands. I gripped the knife tighter, every nerve in my body screaming at me to fight, to finally end this. But before I could act, Thomas lunged at Henry from behind, wrapping his arms around him. They wrestled violently, crashing into the trees. Leaves and bark rained down as they struggled. Margaret! Thomas shouted through clenched teeth. Go! Save yourself! I stood frozen, torn in half. I couldn't leave him, not after everything he'd risked for me. The fight grew bloodier, Henry slamming his fists into Thomas's wounded arm. Thomas cried out, but held on with stubborn strength. Then with a sudden twist, Henry broke free and slammed Thomas against the tree. Thomas's body went limp. No! I screamed, running forward with the knife. Henry turned just in time. My blade slashed across his cheek, leaving a red gash. He howled in fury, clutching his face. You little witch, he bellowed. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist. He twisted hard and the knife fell to the ground. My body hit the dirt as he pinned me down, his face dripping blood, his eyes filled with madness. This is it, he growled. No more games. No more lies. He raised his hands to strangle me, and then the sound of a shotgun cracked through the air. Henry froze. His eyes widened. We both turned. Standing at the edge of the clearing was the sheriff, rifle aimed directly at Henry's chest. The world froze in that clearing. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves, Henry's ragged breath, and the faint creak of the sheriff's shotgun as he cocked it tighter. Step away from her, Henry, the sheriff ordered, his voice steady but sharp. Henry's grip on my wrist tightened. His chest rose and fell with fury, blood dripping down his cheek from the slash I had given him. You don't understand, Sheriff, he spat. She's my wife. She belongs to me. The sheriff narrowed his eyes. She doesn't belong to anyone. Let her go, or I'll drop you where you stand. For a moment I thought Henry might defy him. His pride, his anger, they had always been stronger than reason. His fingers dug into my skin, as if he could crush me into silence. But then he saw the cold determination in the sheriff's eyes, and something shifted. Slowly, with a snarl, he released me. I scrambled backward on the ground, clutching my aching wrist. Hands up, the sheriff barked. Henry raised his hands reluctantly, sneering as if he were the one in control. You'll regret this. Do you know who I am? Do you know how much I've done for this town? The sheriff stepped closer, the gun never wavering. I know enough. And I've seen enough. Now turn around. With a growl, Henry obeyed. The sheriff moved quickly, tying Henry's wrists with a thick rope he carried. My husband struggled, but the sheriff yanked the knots tight until Henry cursed in pain. When it was done, the sheriff lowered his weapon slightly and turned to me. His eyes softened. Ma'am, are you all right? I swallowed hard, tears filling my eyes. My voice came out as a whisper. I think so. Thomas stirred on the ground, groaning as he pushed himself upright. His arm bled freely, his face pale. I crawled to him, my hands shaking as I touched his shoulder. You saved me, I whispered. He gave me a weak smile. Not just you, Margaret. We saved each other. The sheriff knelt, checking Thomas's wound. We'll get you both to town. Doctor can patch you up. And this man, He jerked his chin toward Henry, who glared like a caged wolf. He's going straight into a cell. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt the crushing weight of fear lift from my chest. I could breathe. I could see the sky without dread twisting my stomach. The walk back into town was long, but it felt different now. Henry was dragged behind us like a fallen giant, muttering threats under his breath. Yet his power was gone. The people who had turned away before would soon see him for what he truly was. When we reached the sheriff's office, word had already spread. Neighbors gathered, whispering, staring in disbelief as Henry, the man they once respected, was shoved into a jail cell. His eyes burned through the bars, still promising vengeance, but his voice could no longer touch me. The sheriff stood tall in front of the crowd. "This woman has endured years of torment," he announced. "She found the courage to survive when many wouldn't have. Let this be a lesson. Silence protects no one but the abuser." My knees trembled as he spoke, but I held my head high. For once, I wasn't just the broken woman hiding behind a lie. I was someone who had fought, someone who had endured, someone who had finally been freed. Days turned into weeks. Thomas recovered slowly, his arm bound in bandages, his spirit still strong. I moved into a small house on the edge of town, far from the shadows of that farmhouse. At night I would sit by the window staring out at the stars. I thought of all the years I had wasted in silence, all the pain I had carried inside. But I also thought of the night I finally chose to fight back. The night I pretended to lose my sight just to survive. I realized something important. Strength doesn't always look like fists or fury. Sometimes strength is in the quiet choices, the desperate lies, the will to endure one more day until help comes. Sometimes survival itself is an act of bravery. If you're listening to me right now, maybe you felt trapped too. Maybe you've been told you're weak, or that you'll never escape. Let me tell you, you are stronger than you think. Silence may protect your abuser for a time, but your voice, your courage, even your smallest act of resistance, those are powerful. I lived too long in fear, but I survived long enough to tell you this story. And if my story saves even one soul, then it was worth every word. My name is Margaret. I'm 76 years old, speaking to you now from Kentucky, USA. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. And before you go, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know. Because maybe, just maybe, someone out there who feels trapped will see your comment and realize they are not alone. And that, more than anything, is why I tell my story. The iron bars clanged shut with a finality that echoed in my bones. Henry was behind them, pacing like a restless beast, his eyes never leaving me even as the sheriff locked the door. I thought his arrest would end everything, that peace would follow, but I quickly learned the truth. He might have been caged, but the shadows of what he had done still lived inside me. The first night in my new little house, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every howl of the wind outside made my heart race. I would sit up in bed, clutching the blanket, convinced Henry had broken free and was standing in the corner of my room. More than once, I lit a lamp just to prove to myself I wasn't imagining him. Thomas visited as often as he could. His arm was healing, though the scar would remain for life. He would sit by my side, telling me stories about his days on the farm, trying to coax a smile out of me. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes I just sat in silence, staring into the distance. "You've been free a month now, Margaret," he said one evening, gently squeezing my hand. "But you're still living like you're chained." He was right. My body was free, but my mind was still trapped in that farmhouse. The townsfolk, too, had changed toward me. Some brought me bread and flowers, whispering apologies for not helping sooner. Others avoided me altogether, their eyes filled with guilt, as though my story reminded them of their own failures. Children would sometimes gather outside my fence, wide-eyed, asking, "Is it true you went blind and got your sight back?" I didn't know how to answer. One afternoon, I walked through the marketplace, and a woman I had once called a friend stopped me. She took my hands in hers, her eyes brimming with tears. "Margaret, I knew something was wrong all those years, but I was afraid to say anything. I'm so sorry." Her apology cut deeper than her silence ever had. Because I realized then, it wasn't just Henry who had trapped me. Fear had trapped the whole town. That night I sat by the fire and thought long about my life. My children had grown distant. My grandchildren barely knew me. I had been too ashamed to let them see the truth, too broken to tell them what their father and grandfather had done. But if I stayed silent now, what lesson would they learn? That suffering should be hidden? That silence is survival? No. I couldn't let that be the legacy I left behind. So the next Sunday, I did something that terrified me more than Henry's fists ever had. I stood up in church. The congregation turned to look as I walked slowly to the front. My knees shook, but I forced myself to keep going. When I reached the pulpit, I laid my hands flat against the wood and raised my eyes. I have a story to tell, I began. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. For years I lived in silence. For years I let fear keep me quiet. My husband beat me, broke me, and I pretended to lose my sight just to escape him. Many of you suspected. Some of you even knew. But none of us spoke. And that silence almost killed me. Gasps filled the room. Some people lowered their heads in shame. Others stared at me with tears in their eyes. I'm not telling you this for pity, I continued. I'm telling you this because someone in this very room may be living in the same fear I lived in. And I want you to know you are not alone. There is always a way out, even if it means pretending, surviving one day at a time, until you find the strength to escape. My hands trembled as I stepped back. For a moment there was silence. Then, slowly, one by one, people began to rise to their feet. They clapped, not out of celebration but out of respect, out of acknowledgement, out of a shared burden finally being spoken. When I returned to my seat, Thomas leaned over and whispered, "You've just done something braver than all the fights we ever had with Henry combined. But courage comes with consequences." That night, a letter was slipped under my door. The handwriting was Henry's. "You think you've won. But my trial is coming. And when I'm free, I'll finish what I started." The paper trembled in my hands. I stared at the words until they blurred through my tears. Henry may have been locked away, but his threat was alive. My freedom was still fragile. And deep in my chest, I knew. The story wasn't over. The letter shook in my hands long after I had read it. Henry's words seemed to crawl off the page and wrap themselves around my throat, squeezing tighter with every heartbeat. "When I'm free, I'll finish what I started." I sat there by the fire, staring at the flickering flames, my breath shallow. My hands trembled so violently that the paper slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor. For a long moment, I couldn't move. It felt as though he were in the room with me, his shadow pressing against the walls, his voice whispering threats in my ear. At last, I forced myself to stand, pick up the letter, and march straight to the sheriff's office. My heart pounded the whole way, but I knew this much. I couldn't hide anymore. The sheriff read the letter, his jaw tightening. "That man never quits," he muttered. "But don't you worry, Margaret. This'll be added to the evidence. It'll work against him in court. Do you think he'll get out?" I asked, my voice cracking. The sheriff's eyes softened. "Not if I can help it. But you should be prepared. Trials don't always go the way they should." That was the problem. For years, Henry had built a reputation in town. He was a hard-working farmer, a man with money and influence. People respected him, even feared him. Some still couldn't believe the man they knew was capable of such cruelty. I had seen the doubt in their eyes when I spoke. As the trial date drew closer, I felt the weight of that doubt pressing on me. Thomas tried to reassure me. He came by often, his arm still in its sling. "You've got nothing to worry about," he said one evening as he chopped kindling for my fire. "You've spoken your truth. Folks heard you." I bit my lip, watching the sparks fly as the axe bit into the wood. But will they believe me? Or will they think I'm just a bitter wife trying to ruin his name? Thomas paused, setting the axe aside. He walked over, gently tilting my chin until my eyes met his. "Margaret, they'll believe you. Because the truth has a way of shining through lies." I wanted to believe him. But my nights told another story. I woke often, drenched in sweat, hearing Henry's voice, feeling his fists. Sometimes I even stumbled through the house in the dark, convinced I had gone blind again. My body remembered the fear, even when my mind told me I was safe. The day of the trial arrived cold and gray. I wore a simple black dress, my hair tied back. As I walked into the courthouse, whispers rippled through the crowd. Some eyes were sympathetic. Others were cold, skeptical. I held my head high, but inside I felt small, like a child standing before giants. Henry was led in wearing chains, his eyes wild but his posture proud. He smirked when he saw me, as if to remind me he still had power. My stomach churned. The proceedings began. Witnesses were called. The sheriff testified about Henry's threats. Thomas about the fight that nearly cost him his life. When it was my turn, I rose to the stand. My knees shook as I swore to tell the truth. I told them everything. About the years of beatings. About the nights I lay awake, too afraid to breathe. About the day I pretended to lose my sight, my last desperate attempt to survive. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. I could see tears in the eyes of some women. Men shifted uncomfortably in their seats. When I finished, silence hung heavy. The judge nodded gravely, then turned to Henry. And Henry laughed. The sound cut through the room like a knife. "She's lying," he said, his voice booming. "Every word. She's always been dramatic, weak, looking for pity. I never laid a hand on her. She's making it all up." His lawyer nodded along, painting me as a bitter wife with wild imagination. My stomach turned as I listened. For every truth I had spoken, Henry spat back a lie. And the worst part? Some people believed him. I saw it in their faces. The trial stretched on for hours, each word tightening the knot in my chest. Finally, the judge announced that the jury would deliberate. We were dismissed until the verdict. I walked out into the cold air, my body trembling. Thomas placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did well, Margaret. No matter what happens, you spoke your truth." But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. That night, as I sat alone by the fire, I heard it. A faint sound outside my window. A scrape, like metal against wood. My heart leapt into my throat. I grabbed the poker from the fireplace and crept to the window. The night was still. But then I saw it. An envelope pinned to my shutters with a knife. My blood ran cold. Hands trembling, I opened the window just enough to snatch it. I pulled the envelope free, the knife clattering to the ground. Inside was a single note, written in the same bold, cruel hand as before. "Verdict or no verdict, I will come for you. And next time, no sheriff, no farm boy, no one will stop me." The paper slipped from my hand as the fire crackled behind me. Henry was locked away. He was supposed to be powerless. And yet, somehow his threats had reached me again. I sank into my chair, clutching the poker tight, my heart racing. The trial wasn't over. And even if justice came, would I ever truly be free? The girl knelt on my porch, sobbing, her thin shoulders shaking in the fading light. I stared at her, frozen, my mind a whirlwind of fear and suspicion. Henry sent her. Those words alone were enough to make my blood run cold. I crouched down slowly, keeping a tight grip on the poker still in my hand. "What's your name, child?" I asked, my voice gentler than I felt. She sniffled, wiping her face with the back of her sleeve. "Clara," she whispered. "My name's Clara." Her voice trembled like brittle glass. "Clara," I repeated softly. "Why did Henry send you here?" She flinched at the sound of his name. He told me to warn you. He said prison won't hold him forever. He said you should watch your back because when he comes, he'll make sure you suffer." Her words were like knives. My stomach twisted. I glanced up and down the road, empty, quiet. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were watching us from the shadows. I helped her to her feet and brought her inside. She clutched her small bundle of clothes to her chest, eyes darting around the room like a frightened bird. "Clara," I said carefully, "how do you know Henry?" Her eyes filled with fresh tears. I worked for him. Cleaning, cooking sometimes. He told me if I didn't do what he asked, he'd hurt my family. He hit me too." Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. Every word she spoke struck me like a hammer. Was Henry's cruelty truly stretching so far? Or was this girl a piece in a darker game, planted to keep me living in fear? Thomas arrived not long after. When he saw Clara, his eyes narrowed. "Who's this?" I explained quickly, handing him the note Henry had sent earlier. His jaw tightened as he listened. Margaret, this could be another trick. Henry's smart, cunning. You can't trust anything tied to him. Clara lifted her head sharply. I'm not lying, she cried. I swear it. He said if I didn't come here, if I didn't tell you, he'd kill me. Her desperation was raw, almost too raw. Thomas looked at me, suspicion in his eyes. We fed her a little bread and stew. She ate quickly, as though she hadn't had a proper meal in days. Afterward, I made her a bed on the couch by the fire. She curled up under the blanket, shivering despite the warmth. When she finally drifted into sleep, I pulled Thomas aside. What if she's telling the truth? I whispered. What if she's another victim like me? Thomas shook his head. And what if she's his messenger, Margaret? What if every word is just meant to break you down again? I didn't answer. My heart was torn in two. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards made me tense. Every sigh of the wind against the shutters set my nerves alight. I watched Clara sleeping by the fire, wondering who she really was, and what she might bring into my life. By morning she was gone. The blanket lay neatly folded. Her bundle of clothes was missing. The door was left slightly ajar, letting in a cold breeze. My heart thudded painfully as I searched the yard, calling her name. But Clara was nowhere. Thomas came running when he heard me shouting. I showed him the empty couch, the open door. His face hardened. I told you she couldn't be trusted, he said. She was sent here to rattle you, and it worked. But she seemed so broken, I whispered. Thomas placed a hand on my shoulder. That's what Henry does best. He breaks people, twists them, makes them into pawns. My stomach churned. Had Clara been one of Henry's pawns, or a lost soul seeking safety? The answer came that evening. I was sitting by the fire trying to calm my racing mind, when I heard the faintest scratch at the door. I froze. Slowly I rose and opened it just a crack. Pinned to the wood with another knife was a new note. I pulled it free with trembling hands. Clara has chosen her side. Soon you'll know which one. Sleep lightly, Margaret. The game has only begun. The note slipped from my fingers, fluttering to the floor. Clara, she was either betraying me or being used as bait. Either way, Henry's shadow stretched longer than I ever imagined. And now I didn't know who to trust. The note lay crumpled on the floor. Its words seared into my mind. Clara has chosen her side. Soon you'll know which one. I barely slept that night. Every flicker of shadow felt like Clara stepping out of the dark. Every whisper of wind against the shutters felt like Henry breathing down my neck. By dawn my nerves were stretched thin as thread. Thomas returned that morning, checking the locks, pacing the room. He tried to hide his worry, but I could see it in the way his jaw clenched, the way his eyes darted to the windows. This isn't just intimidation anymore, he muttered. Henry's got people working for him and they're close. Too close. I stared at the note, still trembling in my hand. But why Clara? Why send her here? Thomas met my eyes. Maybe she's part of it. Maybe she's the bait. I shook my head. Or maybe she's trapped like I was. Maybe she's just another soul he crushed. We had no answers, only fear. That evening I tried to distract myself with chores. I kneaded bread, humming softly to steady my hands. But when I stepped outside to fetch water, I saw it. Something lying at the edge of the path. My stomach dropped. It was Clara's bundle of clothes, torn open, muddy, as if it had been dragged through the woods. I knelt, my hands trembling as I picked it up. Inside was only one thing now, a ribbon frayed and stained. Thomas ran over when he heard me gasp. He looked at the bundle, then scanned the trees. This isn't good, Margaret. Not good at all. My throat tightened. She's in trouble. We have to help her. Or she's leading you right where Henry wants you, Thomas warned. But before we could argue further, a voice drifted through the trees. Weak, desperate. Help, please. I froze. It was Clara. The sound came again, faint but real. Please help me. I took a step forward, but Thomas grabbed my arm. No. It could be a trap. Tears stung my eyes. And if it's not? If she's really out there, alone, hurt? For a moment silence hung heavy. Then Thomas swore under his breath. Stay behind me. We moved cautiously into the woods, following the voice. Branches snapped under our feet. The air grew colder, darker, as though the forest itself held its breath. Then we saw her. Clara lay crumpled at the base of a tree, her dress torn, her face pale. Her ankle was swollen, twisted at an unnatural angle. She looked up as we approached, her eyes wide with fear. He found me," she whispered. "He sent them after me." I knelt beside her, brushing dirt from her face. "Clara, what happened?" Her lips trembled. Men who said they worked for him. They said if I didn't lure you out, they'd kill me. I tried to run, but they caught me." Thomas scanned the woods, tension in every muscle. "Where are they now?" Clara clutched my arm, her grip weak but desperate. "They said they'll be back tonight. For you." The words sent a bolt of ice through my veins. Suddenly, a branch cracked in the distance. Then another. Thomas raised the lantern high, his eyes darting into the shadows. "We need to get out of here. Now." I tried to lift Clara, but she cried out in pain, her ankle useless. Thomas cursed again, then bent down, hoisting her onto his back. We stumbled through the darkening woods, every sound amplified, every rustle, every whisper of leaves. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. Just as we neared the clearing, a figure stepped out from the trees. Tall, broad, his face hidden in shadow. Then another, and another. 3 men, blocking our path. Thomas froze, Clara trembling against his back. I gripped the lantern tighter, my hands slick with sweat. One of the men stepped forward, his voice low and cold. "Henry sends his regards, Margaret." The lantern shook in my hand. The men closed in,